The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
Brock Boeser, he's set to play his last game for the Vancouver Canucks. And what do we have to show for it? A second pairing defenseman and a fourth line forward? What?
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Canuck fans, we made it. We made it. Mercifully, this day is here, the last day of the Vancouver Canucks 2024-2025 season. We won't talk too much about the game tonight because, hey, I don't think you want to talk too much about what's going on with this team right now with the lineup they're putting out there. But let's get into a couple topics here on Locked On Canucks. I am your host, Trevor Beggs, here on Locked On Canucks. Also, I'm at Daily Hive Vancouver, writing about the Canucks over there as well. Before we dive into the show, I want to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Canucks because it is your Canucks every damn day. And we got your back through the good times and the bad. So if you like what we're doing, go subscribe and like on YouTube. Go follow us and leave a 5-star review on the podcast side because we're not here without you. And we're also not here without those sponsors. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Brock Boeser, the longest tenured member of the Vancouver Canucks. It has been almost 3,000 days since he played his first game for the Vancouver Canucks back at the tail end of the 2017 season. He seems all but gone here in Vancouver, and it didn't have to be this way. Let's touch on that to open up the show. I also want to touch on Thomas Holmstrom 2.0 potentially being on the Vancouver Canucks. That's the name I hadn't heard of in a long time. Until Rick Tocchet mentioned him and compared him to a current Canuck earlier this week. So let's dive into that comparison. We'll also get to a Cam Neely Former Canuck of the week as well as we broadcast here on the last day of the Vancouver Canucks 2024-2025 season. And heading into this season, it was always a potential situation that Brock Boeser would leave the Vancouver Canucks. But I don't think anyone saw him going out this way. Sure, we might have predicted that he would fall off from the 40 goals he scored last season. And he hasn't necessarily been poor this season, although he's been porous for stretches. But lo and behold, he is set to walk as an unrestricted free agent, more likely than not, for your Vancouver Canucks. And I think there's two main points here that Canucks fans should understand. And should probably have some anger towards management about, and that is the handling of Brock Boeser and who they have chosen to have in place of Brock Boeser on this roster. Let's touch first on the obvious, and that is the asset mismanagement with Brock Boeser. Man, oh man, talking about Brock Boeser, the sexiest Canuck on hump day as well, man. Unbelievable. The stars are aligning here. But Brock Boeser, we all know that, he was going to be due a raise from the $6.65 million contract that he signed, a 3-year deal at the time with Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford in the summer of 2022. So we knew that this was potentially coming down the line. And look, the guy's earned a raise based on the fact that he scored at a 30-goal pace. He's scored 40 goals last season, right? He has been consistent overall throughout his NHL career. But for the Canucks, where they were at the trade deadline, with the season in the tank, with the Stanley Cup odds all but dashed. I mean, Kyle and I were calling this team cooked back in mid-January when they lost to the Winnipeg Jets 6-1. We knew that the Stanley Cup wasn't on the horizon this season. For the Canucks to keep Brock Boeser at the trade deadline, claiming that the offers weren't good enough. Well, no, what's not good enough is letting a guy in Brock Boeser, a former first-round pick, who has absolutely hit on where he was drafted at 23rd overall, who has been a model player for this franchise, a consistent scorer, a top 6 winger, really a first-line winger at the NHL level. to let him walk in free agency for nothing, to not trade him at the deadline, is absolutely bananas. And look, if the Canucks made the playoffs, things would have been different. That was the risk that Alvin took at the time. But again, Kyle and I said at the time on this show, everydayers know, it was poor asset management and just really porous future forward-looking mentality to keep Brock Boeser at the trade deadline. It made zero sense. And now a Canuck team that, they're not rich in assets. They got a couple mid-first round picks potentially coming down the line. They got 2 top prospects. But this is not an asset-rich organization. For them to let Brock Boeser walk in free agency coming up here and to not get anything for him at the trade deadline is just absolute Jim Benning bananas type mentality from the Vancouver Canucks and this organization. So that's part one of the issue with Brock Boeser here and how the Canucks really have screwed up with him. The second is who they chose in place of Brock Boeser. And it's not linear in this scenario because, look, the report from Rick Tocchet was that Brock Boeser was offered a 5-year extension, paying him $8 million US per season. Not bad numbers on an annual basis, but of course, Brock Boeser wants that bag. But the interesting thing about that $8 million number is the Canucks did sign extensions for 2 other newcomers in Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. Those contracts equal $8 million US on the nose. Marcus Pettersson signed for 6 seasons after this one at $5.5 million. Drew O'Connor signed for 2 seasons after this one at $2.5 million. And really, I don't think I'm grasping at straws here. The Canucks chose 2 guys who had been here for a cup of coffee in Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor over Brock Boeser. And it's typical hockey mentality. Maybe the ego is getting in the way. Obviously, they're looking for stylistic fits with this team. But were the Canucks really right in choosing Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor over Brock Boeser? I would say absolutely not. Because the caveat in this situation is that the Canucks, they also traded away a first-round pick, an unprotected 2026 first-round pick. That is what's going to happen with the New York Rangers here. A 2026 unprotected first-round pick that they traded away for Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. So, I hope Canucks management looks at themselves in the mirror and goes, what the F have we done here? Because sure, you don't like Brock Boeser's speed. He's a bit more of a supporting player on the top line, maybe rather than a play driver. But you replace Brock Boeser with Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor, a second-pairing defenseman, and a fourth-line winger at the cost of letting Brock Boeser walk for nothing. And, you trade away a 2026 first-round pick in there as well. And now I don't want to make the Canuck fans depressed here, but this is just the truth. The Canucks, their asset management here has been piss poor. After, what started as a pretty darn good tenure here for Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford. And look, I'm not saying it's all doom and gloom. I'm not saying fire Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford. Everyone makes mistakes, even guys like Jim Rutherford who have been around the game forever. But the Canucks really need to look at themselves in the mirror here and go, what the hell did we just do? And how can we avoid this in the future? Now, the last note I'll make here about Brock Boeser, Marcus Pettersson, Drew O'Connor is just the value they provide. And I'm using our friends over at The Athletic, the player card model from Dom at The Athletic, to gauge, is this actually a travesty? Letting Brock Boeser walk and, of course, keeping Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. And according to the player card model at The Athletic, man, oh man, Marcus Pettersson, the second most valuable player on the Canucks this season, which is wild to think about. And just for a quick refresher, the player card model takes into account your goals, assists, special teams play, some of the underlying metrics as well. And it weights the last 3 seasons, but it weights more heavily, obviously, towards this season. Marcus Pettersson's contract or his market value based on his play, according to The Athletic, is $7.4 million. That is, again, the second highest mark on the Canucks this season, of course, only behind Quinn Hughes. Brock Boeser, meanwhile, his market value based on the player card model here is only $4.5 million. Drew O'Connor is at $1.5 million. Again, he is a fourth-line winger. Let's not kid ourselves. He's not much more than that. So, according to the Athletic player card model, Marcus Pettersson is already better than Brock Boeser. And, you have Drew O'Connor as well. But my point still stands. It is incredibly poor asset management to trade a first-round pick for two guys who don't move the needle, didn't get you to the playoffs, and oh yeah, you keep a guy in Brock Boeser to try and make the playoffs. You miss the playoffs, and you're going to let this guy walk in free agency when he could have gotten something at the deadline. This Canucks organization needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror because a lot's gone wrong this season, and a lot of it falls at the feet of Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford. What happened to the bald-headed beauties here in Vancouver? Something's changed with this organization. I don't know what they were drinking this season. Man, oh man, when Patrick Allvin made Elias Pettersson those Swedish meatballs to try to convince him to re-sign, I don't know what he put in them. I don't know if he fed them to the rest of the team, but man, oh man, it has been the first time in their tenure where Canuck fans really should be questioning what the hell is this management group doing. We got lots of time to reminisce on that throughout this offseason, especially as we see some of the big moves that Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford may make. But hit me up in the comments, whether on YouTube Live or after the fact, and let me know. Did the Canucks make a massive mistake here with Brock Boeser? And part of the reason I ask it is because I feel like a lot of Canuck fans aren't too upset about seeing Brock Boeser leave. But when you look at it in the context of you gave away a first-round pick for Marcus Pettersson, Drew O'Connor, you re-signed those guys, you let Brock Boeser walk for nothing. I don't know how you come out of that and argue that it is piss-poor asset management. So let me know in the comments, what do you prefer? Brock Boeser in a first or Marcus Pettersson and Drew Connor? Let's get to break here on Locked On Canucks. And on the other side, let's talk about the future, baby. Let's also talk about the past. What am I, Ebenezer Scrooge? What is this, Christmas? Find out on the other side as we talk about one young Canuck and Thomas Holmstrom. That's coming up on the other side here on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every damn day, after we shout at our friends at Monarch Money. Do you ever look at your bank account and wonder, where in the hell did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, baby, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's so much more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building that wealth, baby. And a simple way to build your wealth is subscribe to Locked On Canucks, okay? It's a free subscription. There you go. Boom, bam. Saving you money right there. And Monarch Money, okay, that not only am I spreading the love, Monarch Money is spreading the love. They help you and your partner, get more intimate, baby, because managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without stress. And you know what they say when there's no stress, baby? Ho, let's go. So make sure you take the stress out of your financial situation and take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year, baby. All right. We're back here on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every damn day. And again, we got a lot of offseason talk coming up here, but we'll also dive into the NHL playoffs as well. And I'll tease one segment here that I'm working on is why we hate each and every team around the NHL. Why do we hate the Minnesota Wild? Why do we hate the Colorado Avalanche? And why do we hate the Toronto Maple Leafs? That one should be an easy one. We'll get into that as the playoffs take place here on Locked On Canucks and talk some smack, baby. Talk some smack. What do I got to lose? I'm just a guy behind a computer with the microphone, and I can take the heat, okay? It's no problem. Hopefully there's other cities can take the heat as well. One guy who's been heating up recently. Oh, wow. One guy who's been heating up recently has been Linus Karlsson. 5 points in his last 9 games. Scores the game-tying goal against the San Jose Sharks on Monday night, which ultimately helped the Canucks pick up the victory. I'm looking more and more like a guy who can at least be a fourth-line player next season. But can he be more than that, do you ask? Well, Rick Tocchet had a really interesting quote about Linus Karlsson recently, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the quote, but Basically, that Linus Karlsson, a good comparable for him could be Thomas Holmstrom. Both are players that, go to the net hard. Both are guys that were, late round picks or at least not highly touted prospects, and guys that took a little bit longer to come into their own in the NHL. And it got me thinking, could Linus Karlsson be the next Thomas Holmstrom? So let's dive into that a little bit. So when you look at Thomas Holmstrom, he was a 10th round pick back when they were doing that back in the day in 1994, picked by the Detroit Red Wings. Of course, stayed in Sweden for a couple seasons after that in the SEL, and didn't come over to North America until 3 years after being drafted by the team. When he joined the Detroit Red Wings, he ended up being a fourth liner on a team that went on to win the Stanley Cup. His first 2 seasons in the NHL, actually, he helps the Red Wings win the Stanley Cup. More in a support role. His first year, he actually played only 1 playoff game. In his second year, exploded for 7 goals and 19 points in 22 games in the 1997-98 playoffs. But in both those years in the regular season, he was not much more than just a fourth line forward. I mean, he has 6 goals and 9 points in 47 games in his first year, 5 goals, 22 points in 57 games in his second season. And then after that, really settled in as about a 10 to 15 goal, 30 to 35 to 40 point player for the Detroit Red Wings for the next few seasons. And worth noting as well that he didn't break into the NHL until at the age of 23, but really he turned 24 in January of that year. So his age 23-24 season was when he really broke in as an NHLer. Linus Karlsson, again, this isn't a direct comparable, but an interesting one nonetheless, because Linus Karlsson is now 25 years old. He turned 25 this season, so a year older than Thomas Holmstrom was when he first became a full-time NHL player. But again, both are, play bigger than they are. Thomas Holmstrom weighed in at 6 feet, 198 pounds, but he played tough as nails. Karlsson checks in at 6 foot 180 pounds right now. But of course, he looks like he's playing bigger than him out there. He's a hard guy to knock off the puck. But can he become a Thomas Holmstrom-like player for the Vancouver Canucks? And, one thing Thomas Holmstrom did incredibly well, of course, was on the power play. Parking that big rear end in front of the net and just burying goals from around the crease, much like Jake DeBrusk has done this season for the Vancouver Canucks. And, you've seen Karlsson get a chance here at the NHL level to do that on power play too, with some spot duty there. But you look at the AHL this season, most of his 21 goals have come from within 5 feet of the net. He said it himself. That's the identity that he wants to carve out on this team. And I think there's a place for him here to do that. Now, that being said, the Canucks do have other big bodies, maybe not with the soft touch that Karlsson has in terms of his hands. But you got guys like, Kiefer Sherwood, Jake DeBrusk, Dakota Joshua, Drew O'Connor. Like, you do got some bigger bodies on this team now. Like, the Canucks aren't as soft as they were maybe a couple seasons ago under Bruce Boudreau. Like, there are some guys there now who can get to the net and score some greasy goals. But Linus Karlsson's done it with more regularity of late. And I think he can look up to a guy like Thomas Holmstrom. I'm not saying that Karlsson's going to break out and become this, middle six beast and PP1 specialist like Thomas Holmstrom was. But if you want a bit of hope for Linus Karlsson as well, Thomas Holmstrom didn't really break out as a really electric offensive player until after the lockout. And by that time, he was 33 years old. 33 years old when he started to have his best seasons in the NHL. So he had the year after the lockout in 05-06, had 29 goals, 59 points in 81 games, and then has his first 30-goal season the following year as a 34-year-old, 30 goals and 52 points in 77 games. Linus Karlsson, there is an opportunity here for him, again, not maybe become a 30-goal guy, but to potentially be at his peak. Let's call him a bottom six guy, a power play specialist who can bang in 15 to 20 goals a season. I mean, look, this is a guy who had 21 goals in 30 AHL games this season. He was a point per game player in the AHL last season as well. He doesn't get pushed around out there. And I think he's becoming more and more comfortable at the NHL level right now. For him, much like Thomas Holmstrom, it's got to start in a fourth line role. But when you look at the Canucks roster right now, I think there's a good goddamn chance that Linus Karlsson could stick around as a fourth liner next year. I know that's not a sexy take. It's not really what a lot of people want to see. But again, looking at this team right now, like there would be a spot open in the bottom 6, depending on what happens with guys like Pius Suter this offseason. Does Jonathan Lecker-Mackey make this team? But in the bottom 6, looks like Linus Karlsson, I would say, has surpassed the likes of like an Arshdeep Bains, a Max Hassan for more regular playing time for your Vancouver Canucks next season. Can Linus Karlsson become the next Thomas Holmstrom? Probably not. But if he can become Thomas Holmstrom light, that is a big win for the Vancouver Canucks, keeping the Alex Burrows trade tree alive, baby. Let's get to a quick break here. Shout out our friends over at FanDuel. And on the other side, we'll get some of your comments and a Cam Neely Former Canuck of the Week here on Locked On Canucks. The NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when they place their first $5 bet, and they'll get the $250 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. And FanDuel, the app, man, they make it easy peasy lemon squeezy. I can place bets when I'm sitting on the toilet. I can go check out the Discord for our page. You can go check out the Discord and place bets on FanDuel when you're sitting on the can. And there you go. Boom, bam. And, on the others, with the NHL playoffs coming up, you can place bets on that as well. Be betting on the Ottawa Senators to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's go. Dallas, Colorado is going to be a great matchup as well. Lots to get into and to get some extra skin in the game, because Canuck fans, we got a hole in our lives right now. And I'm not saying fill that hole with betting, but if you're doing it responsibly, it's not a bad way to enjoy the NHL playoffs just a little bit more. It should be exciting stuff. Again, if you have any problems with gambling, we have numbers for the hotline in the description of this episode. But if you're betting on sports, make sure you go check out FanDuel and go visit FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every damn day. And we're here on the last game, mercifully, thank you, the last game of the 2024-25 season. A season with a lot of promise that did not deliver on that promise, much like me in the bedroom. Let's get to the segment here, and then we'll wrap up with a couple comments here on Locked On Canucks. We like to run this segment every once in a while, and it's called the Cam Neely Former Canuck of the Week.
I don't want to say goodbye.
All right, the Cam Neely Former Canuck of the Week. And man, oh man, I did think about a couple players here. Of course, JT Miller, he's still tearing up with the New York Rangers. Not that he helped them make the playoffs or anything, but he does have 8 points in his last 5 games. I think about a guy like Dylan Guenther as well. Yeah, he wasn't a Canuck, but he would have been a Canuck up until Jim Benning dealt a first-round pick and all those other garbage assets for OEL. But let's talk about a guy who is now on his 3rd team since leaving the Vancouver Canucks, and a guy who's off to some success in his new home, and that is Andrei Kuzmenko with the Los Angeles Kings. Now, Andrei Kuzmenko has 5 goals and 17 points in 21 games since joining the Los Angeles Kings, a team who at the deadline reportedly was interested in Brock Boeser, and some of the reporting there has been the Kings offered a second for Brock Boeser. The Canucks didn't take it, and then they go around and trade a 3rd-round pick for Andrei Kuzmenko. And Kuzmenko, again, doing pretty darn well for his debut with the Los Angeles Kings. And I'm not going to lie, man, I don't really want to cheer for a division rival, but I will be rooting for the LA Kings to, finally erase those playoff demons and get past the Edmonton Oilers. And who knows, maybe Andrei Kuzmenko, it'll be his first taste of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm curious to see what he can do there for that team. So Andrei Kuzmenko gets the shout out here as the Cam Neely Former Canuck of the Week. Perhaps his last days in the NHL with how much movement he's had. Maybe he's a guy that goes back to the KHL after this season. Who knows? Maybe the LA Kings, if he keeps us up in the postseason, maybe they retain a guy like Andrei Kuzmenko, who obviously brings the vibes. He brings some pretty flashy offensive ability. But of course, there's a reason why the guy is now on his 4th NHL team in the 3 years since coming over to the NHL. But that's enough about Andrei Kuzmenko. Let's get to some of the comments here. The best people, the best fans in the world here on Locked On Canucks. I want to get to this positivity here from Andrew. Okay, Andrew, this is the positivity I needed. Okay, Andrew says, I'm not blaming management at all. It's injury and player motivation this year. The only thing he doesn't disagree with is the no trade at the trade deadline. Mike Laval in the comments kind of piggybacking off of that, saying the biggest mistake about Boeser was not moving him at the deadline. Even if we made the playoffs, this team was likely looking at a first-round exit, especially if we don't get a top 4 defender. Look, the not moving Brock Boeser at the deadline at this point was inexcusable, right? So that's why, Andrew alluded to it as well. He's not blaming management except for the fact that they didn't move Boeser at the trade deadline. But injury and player motivation, that is a fair case for Brock Boeser. And again, I think that's more reason why I think the Canucks should have kept Brock Boeser in the first over Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. Or you trade Brock Boeser and you build these assets to really make a difference this offseason. Now the Canucks are kind of hamstrung, right? And yeah, the defense is better with Marcus Pettersson. Like, there's no denying that. And again, he's the second most valuable player on the Vancouver Canucks this season, apparently. But again, in terms of asset management, you should have kept Brock Boeser around. And to Andrew's point, Brock Boeser probably performs better next season than he did this year if he's able to stay healthy. I mean, you don't expect to get blindsided to the head with an elbow at any point during an NHL season, especially early on when Brock Boeser was off to a pretty good start. And of course, the distractions, which have gone to this guy over the years, got to him again this season as well. And that, of course, had an impact on his performance. But yeah, the Canucks, in my opinion, they should have kept Brock Boeser, or at least not traded that first for Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. Don't let the ghost of Jim Benning run this organization. Let's get to one or two more comments before we get out of here on Locked On Canucks. Let's get to the social media roundup with the mayor of Surrey, Aaron Gray. Did you see after the Canucks' last game, Brock Boeser left the arena with an autographed jersey? He's not returning. This is unfortunate. Yeah, so if you missed it, there was a fan who posted on social media. Some of the players in the drive out of the parkade at Rogers Arena, fans will pick him off and get a photo. And it looked like in Brock Boeser's car, there was a signed team jersey from everyone on the team. A pretty clear sign that he's not returning. But, I mean, that's just more salt in the wound at this point. I think we all know, based on Brock Boeser's comments, he's not likely to return. The writing's been on the wall based on what Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford have said. So, yeah, Brock Boeser, no longer Vancouver. The Vancouver Canucks, a little less sexy next season. I'm not sure who are the biggest man rockets out there in free agencies. Maybe someone could do a deep dive for me on that. And let's end finally with the scouting report on Drew O'Connor. Jay Schro saying O'Connor's a fast skater with good sense. If he gets some goal-scoring finish, he could be a bargain. And really, we saw with Jake DeBrusk this season. The book was out on this guy. Jake DeBrusk, a streaky goal scorer. He absolutely lived up to the streaky mentality here this season. The book on Drew O'Connor heading into this season was, yeah, he skates hard, he competes hard, but he has no finish. And I think you've seen a bit of that with the Vancouver Canucks as well. Man, oh man, speaking of no finish, now we got to finish here on Locked On Canucks. Speaking of a podcast that's got speed, grit, and no skill, that may be us here on Locked On Canucks as well. But we try our best, okay? So if you like what we're doing, go subscribe and like on YouTube. On the podcast side, go follow us and leave a 5-star review. Will there be a postcast for the final game this season? I'm not quite sure, but I know that we will be back tomorrow on Locked On Canucks. For now, I'm Trevor Beggs, and I appreciate the hell out of you for tuning in to this show called Locked On Canucks.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.